this evening's Instagram live entitled Spiritual Intimacy, Creating Safe Spaces for Women. I'll be joined by the Village Auntie hopefully soon. Apologies for the slight delay. So today's Instagram live is entitled Spiritual Intimacy, Creating Safe Spaces for Women, where I'm looking forward to speaking to a prominent, well-renowned certified sexual health educator, intimacy coach, and the founder of the Village Auntie Institute. The Village Auntie, who I'm sure many of you who are aware of, is doing a lot of great things. She has an upcoming course, a 3-week course starting on June the 26th. It's a course specifically for women on spiritual intimacy. So please make sure if you haven't bought a ticket, make sure you buy a ticket. Tickets are available from the link in her bio on her Instagram page. The title of the course is called Pilgrimage of the Soul. And like I said, it's for women. And I'll be speaking a little to the Village Auntie a little bit about that course. Hopefully she's going to join us soon. But yeah, like I said, it's a 3-week course for women about faith, spirituality, and she will be drawing upon the story of Hajar. May Allah be pleased with her. And again, like I said, anyone who's not familiar with the Village Auntie's work, I definitely recommend you should check her out. She's got a really good course coming up, Pilgrimage of the Soul, a 3-week course starting on June the 26th. And I've also got another course coming up. Oh, she's here. Is she? Yes. Let me add her. For you. I hope everyone is well, wherever you are listening to this from. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I am very well. Sorry I'm late. I do apologize. I'm going to try and move the screen because half my head is chopped off. That's a bit better.
I'm trying to get some lighting here so that it won't be so. It's not dark, but so at least there can be some light.
To be fair, the last couple of videos, someone actually messaged me and said that, why is it on your IG lives, the person you're speaking to, they look really clear, but you look really dark and grey? And it was a non-black person so I thought, let me kind of wind them up. So I said, was that a racist comment? What did you mean by that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by that. I'm just pulling your lip. But yeah, I think I'm trying to sort out my lighting because, yeah, I've noticed quite a few of my IG lives. I'm not that clear, so hopefully this one's a bit better.
You're crystal clear.
Alhamdulillah. So, before we start, again, I had a few words a little bit about your course, about the topic we're going to speak about today's topic. But do you mind talking a little bit about your course that's coming up in a couple of weeks, and then we'll speak a little bit about it more again during the middle of our IG live. But I just want first before we get into the topic at hand, I want you to kind of talk a little bit about your upcoming course and why people should purchase a ticket, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the course is called Pilgrimage of the Soul, and it came about last year because people were not able to make Hajj because of COVID. The Hajj restrictions were very tight. Coincidentally, they are also tight this year. People will be able to make Hajj, but only people who are living within Saudi Arabia already. So nobody from outside will be able to attend. And I think the impetus behind creating the course was twofold. One was to create a portal for people to channel this want for worship. There were sisters that I knew who were planning to make Hajj or planning to make Umrah, and they weren't able to. So we wanted to create something that would give women a focused way to worship during Dhul Hijjah. The second reason was I was seeing that there were a lot of women who felt marginalized in spiritual spaces. So we had just finished Ramadan Intensive. It was the first Ramadan Intensive. It was amazing. And sisters were like, well, where can we get more? And I think in the modern day masajid, you have women who are thirsty for knowledge, but there's no place for them to take knowledge from. And sometimes when there is a place for them to take knowledge, the knowledge that is given is through this very skewed Western male lens that does not lead itself to the true nature of Islam. So we did Pilgrimage of the Soul, and we took the story of our spiritual grandmother, Hajar, alayhi salam, and use that to talk about modern day applications of spiritual intimacy and embodied spirituality for women who are students, mothers, entrepreneurs, workers, women who are struggling, but women who are also striving. And I find that the story of Hajar is not, it's often taught as a side story. It's not taught as a main story, and I think her story alone can stand alone. It does not have to be in light of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. She can stand alone. She was a Black Muslim woman, and a lot of people don't realize that Hajar alayhi salam is the only woman for whom a rite of Hajj was commemorated. We literally walk in her footsteps when we make Hajj and Umrah. And so I thought it was important to delve into her story, but also to look at it as a practical example of embodied spirituality. So we're doing it for the second and last time. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize. We're going to archive this course after we offer it this time, just because I like to stay nimble. I always like to do something new, something fresh. The market is changing in terms of the way that people consume information. So the world is open. People are outsiding all day, every day. They're outside. So sitting in front of a screen, participating in a class that lasts for a number of weeks is not something that is the same as it was a year ago. So this will be the last time that I'm offering Pilgrimage of the Soul. It will come about again later down the line, inshallah, but in a completely different format. And it's really my favorite class. It's my favorite class because it allows me as a woman to connect with a spiritual ancestor. And we often think of only the prophets as being our spiritual ancestors, but Hajar alayhi salam was the mother of a spiritual lineage that we continue to take from until this very day. And so it's my favorite class. I love the community that it brings. I love that there are so many women from around the world who participate, and I'm just excited for it to start next Saturday. So that
It's
was like
next Saturday.
that was long.
It's actually next Saturday. It's not even a couple of weeks. Sorry, I said a couple of weeks. And
Yeah.
what time is it? What time does it start?
So the class starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I use New York City as my marker anytime I time classes because everybody kind of knows where New York City is and they can use it to gauge. But the good thing is that the class starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but all of the classes are recorded. So it doesn't really matter if you're present for the class live or not. You'll still get the audio recording of the class and all of the extras that go with it. So you can listen to it as a podcast during the week. You don't have to be present to participate in the class.
Fantastic. So 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's 4 p.m. anyone in the UK. So still reasonable for anyone. Yeah. So that's in the afternoon. That's great. And will people be able to ask you questions directly during the course? Is it going to be interactive?
Absolutely. All of my classes are 100% interactive. You can click the link in my bio, go to the Village Auntie page. You click the link in the bio, it takes you straight to the registration page. I love my classes to be interactive. I do not want to talk to one of the reasons why I haven't up until this point done any pre-recorded classes because my classes thrive on engagement. And in addition to the class, you also get an invitation to the private WhatsApp community that I'm part of, and it is comprised of women who have taken other classes before, women who have been with me since day one, and that's another place for really generative discussion with women from all walks of life, all around the world, all ages. So yes, this is not just a class where I'm talking to you on a screen. You're actually interacting with me in real time and also offline.
That's great. And I just think, again, I just want to reiterate for anyone listening, whether, man or woman, but especially for our sisters, because I often hear, like you mentioned earlier, that there aren't enough spaces or places for women to go and learn about spirituality, the deen, and things like that. So we have a fabulous course that's starting next week. If you aren't able to attend, then at least then the least that you can do is actually tell your friends, because I think it's one thing about complaining and talking about the problems, but when we've got solutions and we've got experts and people that are more than capable of giving us beneficial, authentic knowledge, and at least the least we can do is kind of share it, even if we can't attend. So I'm hoping that anyone listening to this, whether it's listening to it now or later on, that you can definitely attend. If not, at least then share it with people in your community or people that you think might be interested in learning about spiritual intimacy. Which that now leads me to my first question is, because of spiritual intimacy, I just wanted to first, like, can we first define it? Because when I put up the first post, sorry, that I'm going to be speaking about spiritual intimacy, someone reached out to me and was like, is that soulful sex? Is that someone else? Yeah, someone. So now I realized, oh, actually, it's probably the starting point. We should actually define what we mean, because it can mean different things to different people. So what we're speaking about in our context, and then maybe take it from there. So my first question, what does spiritual intimacy mean to you?
So spiritual intimacy to me is essence, actualization, taqwa and tawakkul, consciousness of God, and tawakkul being reliance on God. So spiritual intimacy is the actualization of that. So it's the actual practice of being conscious of God at all times, and also relying upon God as your source of safety, as your source of comfort. Spiritual intimacy is wanting to rush to prayer or wanting to rush to worship the same way that you might want to call your girlfriend, right? Or your best friend, or the way you might want to talk to your father. It's Father's Day in America, so the way you might want to rush and talk to your father, people that you really love. Spiritual intimacy is an embodied act of worship that is perpetual. It does not mean that you have to be a perfect Muslim or a perfect believer. You don't have to be a perfect person, but it is this perpetual consciousness of God being present in your life at all times. That is spiritual intimacy. And it's interesting that someone asked, is it soulful sex? Because someone once asked me, well, why do you talk about spirituality and you talk about sex as if they were different? And they're not different at all. My work lies at that intersection of the sacred and the sacral. So it is possible for me to talk about spiritual intimacy and reliance upon God and knowledge about God, because God gave us this act in the dunya, which is sex, which is a way for us to gain intimacy with another human being. Sex is one of the acts that is an embodied spiritual intimacy. It's a way of being conscious and being grateful to creating this pleasurable act that is official and is also in itself a form of worship. So that's spiritual intimacy, knowing that there is a God, relying on that God at all times.
Lovely. That's fantastic. And just the second part of like the title, you've kind of answered this already in the beginning, but just wanted to reiterate, because we've entitled it creating safe spaces for women, or sacred spaces. Sorry, I said sacred space, and I intentionally used the word sacred rather than safe, or third space, because I think there's a difference between just being a safe space and a sacred space, which is connected to hopefully a place where people can be connected or reinvigorated or renew their faith with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I know you do some work for men, but predominantly, correct me if I'm wrong, I understand most of your work is for women. Why is it important for you to create sacred spaces for women?
I think it's important to create sacred spaces for women, not because it's revolutionary. I think it's actually the opposite. I think it is hearkening back to the traditional way in which, from an Islamic context, from an African context, from a basic human context, human beings generally consumed their information in segregated spaces, whether that was young people with young people, older people with older people, men with men, women with women, people who occupy other gender spaces with, amongst themselves as well. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I think that one of the reasons why I like to have women's only spaces is there is a collective side of religion that I can hear. It's not audible, but it's like a metaphysical side that I feel and hear when women enter a Village Auntie space, because they don't have to worry about being policed, about being judged, about being marginalized, about people talking over them. This is a space that is curated and facilitated by women for women. So there is a safety in that. And because of the way that I approach topics, even if I'm talking about something like female orgasm or female ejaculation, it is a safe and sacred space. And I think anytime you have men that are a part of that space, even if they are well-meaning men, right? Even if they're good men. If you came to one of my classes, Habib, right? And you are probably, one of, if not the most favorite man in the village, right? Women would feel a certain kind of way. There would be a certain expectation that we would have. And so I wanted to reclaim women-centered spaces for education because, one, I think it's important. And two, I think you get the safety, the security, you get the sanctity of the space.
That's a brilliant answer. I love that. I just wanted to go back to, forgive me if I'm looking down because like previously I like to write notes, and I've got some pre-planned questions, but some of the stuff that you're saying, I wanted to kind of like pick your brain because you mentioned a couple of like really important points I wanted to kind of like you to expand on. You mentioned Hajar alayhi salam and why you wanted to choose, or you're focusing on her for the Pilgrimage of the Soul course. Without going too much in detail, because I know you're going to discuss it, I'm assuming, in the course, but can you tell us maybe like one or two things about her life which maybe people are not aware of, who she is, why you chose to focus on her story? In addition to what you mentioned about the Hajj, is there anything else about that about her life or a story that fascinated you, or you think people aren't aware of that you think would be interesting?
Sure. So Imam Dr. Umar Suleiman, who was a very well-known educator, religious leader, social justice leader in America, he did a lecture about Hajar alayhi salam, and he talks about how we often talk about her as being a slave girl, right? She was a slave girl who was given to the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And actually, she had a noble lineage herself. She came from a noble lineage. She was not just, I think when people slap that marker of, oh, she was enslaved or she was a slave, it sort of cuts off their ancestry, but she was a woman from a noble line as well. And I think that's important to remember because she was a Black Muslim woman. A lot of people, by the way, did not know that she was Black, which I thought was interesting. So I wanted to pull that out because it speaks to the modern day erasure of our ancestry and the modern day erasure of women's stature in and of themselves, irrespective of the men that they're connected to. So I wanted to bring that out and honor her as a person just by herself. The other thing that I think is very interesting is we just hear the story of how she was abandoned in the desert, but we don't hear about what happened after that. What happened after that is when Zamzam, when the water began to flow, it was going to cover the whole earth. So Hajar had to figure out a way to like, okay, this is this resource that is flowing, but I need to figure out a way to like keep it from flooding everything and pool this resource. So she engineered a way to catch the water, which, ultimately became the well of Zamzam. And as tribes would pass, they would have to ask her, can we settle here? Because she was the owner of this resource. And so where she established that well and that resource, the city of Mecca really grew up around that. So when you go to Mecca, you're not just walking in her footsteps when you make Umrah and when you make Hajj. That whole city in the middle of the desert, the reason why you can have a city of that magnitude there is because there's a source of water there. Who was the first person to pool and manage that resource of water? It was Hajar. It was a Muslim woman. It was a Black woman. It was a mother. It was a woman who had to rely on resilience and resourcefulness. And I think that, again, as a contemporary application, it is very timely when you're talking to women who feel as if, I have to make a way out of no way. And that's exactly what she did. She made a way out of no way. And that is a part of her story that we don't focus on enough. But I think for me, that's the most impactful part of her story, is what happened after she ran between Safa and Marwa. Like, what happened after that? We only focus on the pain, but we don't focus on the resilience. And I think that that is something that happens in a lot of women's spiritual lives, whether you're Muslim or Christian. That's the other thing. The third thing that I really liked is I come from a Christian household. I was born and raised Christian. I became a Muslim in my early 20s. And the fact that in the Christian church, Hajar is also a footnote. So I want to bring her from a footnote into the main text. So that's the purpose of this class.
So can non-Muslim women also attend the class, or is it just strictly for Muslim women?
Any of my classes, there's always been non-Muslim women who attend the class. My mother's non-Muslim. My sisters are non-Muslim. My nieces are non-Muslim. Any woman can attend the class. You just have to, identify as a woman and be comfortable being in a woman's space. You do not have to be Muslim to attend. In fact, for my Rite of Passage program, the leaders of one of the pods is an ordained minister. She's a Christian minister. So I had, Christian women in the Ramadan intensive. When you're talking about spiritual intimacy, it's not something that Muslims have the copyright and trademark on. There are Christians who have spiritual intimacy. There are people from all different, spiritual traditions. So this is a class that I think is accessible to all people, regardless of what your background is.
What you said about Hajar's story and, this idea, and you see it not only with Hajar alayhi salam, but other, especially like black figures, not only Muslim figures, but black figures, is that this emphasis, what you mentioned, and I wrote it down because I love that quote, that the idea of focusing on the pain and not the resilience. And that's something that I see far too often. And it's something that I'm glad you said that, because yes, although pain may be part of the story, that's not the core. And it's the resilience. And I think it's just the way we frame and tell people stories and narratives. And I think that for me, that really hit home when you said that. And I was just thinking of Asiya in the this wife of Fir'aun. Similar, as in she was a woman, and she's mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Tahrim, and Allah cites her as an example for the believers, not just the believing women, for the believers, but men and women. So this idea that women figures are examples for women only, and then you've got male figures who are examples for both men and women. That's not actually true from an Islamic, from the Quranic perspective, because you've got examples of men who are examples from both men and women, and you've got examples of women, as Allah's mentioned in the Quran, who are examples for both men and women. And Asiya and Maryam is an example that Allah gives. And again, I'm just thinking, even when I'm thinking of when I read about the story and how it was taught, it generally always focuses on the persecution that she suffered in the hands on at the hands of Pharaoh, rather than the resilience and the fact that she, despite what she was going through, her resilience and her level of iman and the sweetness of iman that she had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, despite, because even in some of the books of tafsir, the Quranic commentators, they talk about how in one narration it said that he put her hands on, like he kind of like crucified her and laid her out in the sun. And then the other things that other commentators say, like some other, really destructive things that he was doing towards her. But despite that, it was her resilience and her iman. That's what Allah praised her for. And it wasn't that she was the wife of someone, she was the mother of someone. So even this idea, when we look at, especially when I'm thinking about how Muslim women's, and I don't like to use the word ideal when you mention like the whole perfect believer is taught, is that the perfect mother or the perfect wife, when the two examples that Allah gave us in the Quran of women were examples for both men and women, the believers, Allah didn't praise them for their status, although it's a great thing for them being a mother or being a wife, if that makes sense. And I just think that's something that I think a lot of both men and women, but especially women, can maybe resonate and look at, that when we're speaking about spiritual intimacy, when we're speaking about, and I don't like to use the word perfect because I don't think that exists, like being a perfect Muslim, we're all on a journey, we're all struggling, but there's resilience in a lot of these stories. That when we read the stories of Hajar, Asiya, even the prophets, there's a journey and there's a struggle, but it's resilience within it. And I think that's something that we can kind of draw upon and celebrate no matter what we're going through. Because rather than just thinking about the pain and the suffering and just waiting for paradise when we're going to be relieved of the pain, look at the resilience and also the triumphs that they kind of achieve. So I just think, I loved your choice of words. I just wanted to kind of went off on a tangent, but that's kind of underlined that the focus on the pain, rather not the resilience. Sorry, I went off one. Next question I wanted to ask, actually, you mentioned earlier about generally when the stories are told, they're told from the perspective of the Western male lens. What did do you mind expanding that? What do you mean by that?
Sure. I think when I'm saying Western, I think I'm really talking about a Eurocentric informed lens. And when I say Eurocentric, I guess the common parlance would be a white gaze, right? So a gaze that is not centered on the experience of melanated people, people of color, Black people, people from the South Asian, subcontinent, people from people of color, people that we would consider people of color. There is a focus on making things very proper, very, focused on, especially when it's talking about women, what can you do to please your husband, not what can you do to please God, right? It's always, how can you please your husband? How can you find a husband? How can you be better for your husband? Not how can you find Allah? How can you get access to Allah? How can you be good, right, quote unquote, in the sight of Allah? How can you incur blessings from Allah? And I think the reason why we focus on the Western male gaze is because men are the ones who are the spiritual leaders. Men are the ones who have the pulpit, right, in the church. They are the ones who are standing up and giving the khutbah and Jummah. And so it is a natural human inclination to want to prioritize people who are like you. So the men are going to prioritize the needs of the men. But what happens is when you focus just on satisfying the needs of men, when you focus on, trying to separate people from their culture, what you wind up doing is you push people further away from the faith. If I get closer to Allah, right? If I'm doing my salah, if I'm praying my sunnah, if I'm making azkar, right? If I am being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm automatically going to be a better wife, a better mother, a better daughter, a better friend. It's just going to happen by default because I'm not doing it so that I can become those things. But when you get closer to God, it makes you a better person. But it's also hard to manage, right? It's almost like it's like Zamzam, right? It's just flowing everywhere. You want to be able to contain it. And I think that religious institutions, not just Muslim institutions, want to be able to control, right? I want to be able to control where your loyalty lies. So if that means that I beat it into your head, right? Metaphorically, you have to be a dutiful wife and a dutiful mother, and you have to want to have these things. That's easier to manage than saying, I want you to get closer to Allah, because we can, as human beings, we can't really quantify Allah. We can't really imagine Allah. So I think it is a method of unconscious control, unconscious power and control. I don't think that we do it intentionally, because women sometimes are the ones who uphold these patriarchal interpretations of Islam. I have had more women tell me, you're wrong, than men. When I'm talking like this, brothers are like, yes, you're right. But there's always a woman who will say, well, no, that's not the way that I was taught. No, that's not correct. Yes, as a woman, you have to be quiet. Yes, as a woman, you have to, one of the things we talk about in the class is we talk about what is a woman's role in Islam. And it's a trick question, because a woman's role in Islam is the same as a man's role in Islam, and that is to worship Allah. It is not to change diapers. It's not to nurse babies. It's not to cook food. It's not to clean the house. And I always have sometimes who vehemently push back against that. No, as a mother, I'm supposed to cook and clean. You can cook and clean, but you don't have to. And if you're going to cook and clean, do it fi sabilillah. Do it because your contribution to your household is sadaqah. Don't do it because you want to look good in the sight of men. It's a minor form of shirk. The way that we deify men in our lives, the way that we, one second, sorry, my kids are being, but it's a minor, you're almost creating partners with Allah when you worry more about what your father thinks and your husband thinks than what you worry about what Allah thinks. And so we talk about how can you take those acts that you may want to do. I love to cook. Right after we get off of this, I'm gonna go and make miang gujia and tuo shinkafa for my kids because my son asked for rice balls today, right? But my intention to do it is not so that my husband will say, oh, I have a good wife. My intention behind doing it is not to appeal some Western male idea of what a good Muslim wife is. I'm going to make that food for my child because that child is an amana for me from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That child has been entrusted to me by Allah, and I'm going to treat that child well because Allah trusted me to take good care of that child. So I'm going to be a good wife and good mother by default, but it doesn't have to be so that we can appeal to this contemporary idea of what a Muslim woman is. So that's kind of like a tangent that I went off on, but that's what I mean when I say shifting it away from a male-centered and having a female-centered approach to spirituality. I think it's a lot more expansive.
Now, I'm actually glad you went on that tangent, and I think that's really important too. And I'm just thinking of, just for the benefit of for people who are not Muslim, or just you referred to hidden shirk, so maybe just explaining what shirk is. And then, yeah, just so it's clear, because I don't get bombarded with these messages later, like, oh, you said such and such, or someone said such and such. Can you translate it?
Yes. So shirk is basically creating partners with God. So you're putting someone on the same level as God. Oftentimes when we talk about shirk, we're talking about it from a standpoint of worshiping idols or worshiping something that you consider a deity in addition to God. But there are often minor ways that we practice shirk unconsciously and unintentionally. And one of the ways is when we try to gain favor from people over gaining favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you'll have women, for example, and this is going to be controversial for some people, but that's okay. I'm okay with it. You'll have sisters who will say, well, I don't wear a scarf. So they'll get married in hijab. They're wearing hijab for Allah. And then they get married and they will say, well, Village Auntie, my husband doesn't want me to wear the scarf anymore, so I'm going to take it off. So then this act, whether you believe it's fard or not, that's not what this is about. You're a woman who wore it because you felt that this was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to do. But then you get married and you take it off because your husband wants you to do it. That is, you have now elevated your husband's needs over that of Allah. It's also where, and it happens, right? You have people who will say, I'm cooking food, but the adhan maghrib goes off. The time for maghrib, the appropriate time for maghrib is very short. But I'm not going to leave from cooking because I have to get my husband his food before, right as he walks in the door, I have to have his plate hot and ready. So I'm going to delay my salah so that I can finish cooking food for my husband. Though it's a slippery slope. This is one of the reasons why you have many women who, they get married. They are not Muslim. They become Muslim when they get married. The marriage goes south. They leave Islam because their husband has taken that place where Allah, there's only room for Allah there. And I understand why it happens, because the way that we teach Islam to women is we put men right there under God, like right there. So it's easy to really confuse it. So that's why I caution women when we're talking in Pilgrimage of the Soul, always manage your intention. What is your intention behind what you're doing? If you're giving money to your household, or you're cooking and you're cleaning and you're complaining the whole time and you're cursing your husband and you're cursing the kids and you're saying stuff in your head, you're not getting any blessings out of that. But if you shift in and say, you know what, I'm not doing this for you, I'm doing this for Allah, it helps to manage so many other things. So that means when I'm upset with my husband and I, we get into arguments just like anyone else. But when I do the things that I do, I'm not doing them for him. I'm doing them for Allah. Does he feel loved because of it? Of course, because when you love Allah, that seeps out onto everything. But he's not my focus. My focus is Allah. It doesn't mean that I don't love my husband and I don't love my children, but it just shifts the intention and it makes things a lot easier as women. Because women, we bear the physical, emotional, and intellectual labor of every community that we are a part of. It doesn't matter where you live. The women are the backbones of those communities. And sometimes resentment can seep in and it'll rob us of our blessings. But if we focus on Allah, then it changes. You know, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when Prophet Ibrahim took Hajar to the desert and was leaving her, I mean, I'm using modern language, right? She's like, you gonna leave me? Like, this what we doing? Like, really, you really about to leave me? And he, you know, he has this commandment from Allah. He's like, yes. So you really gonna leave me and your child? You gonna leave us out here in the desert? There's no water, there's no food, there's no people, there's no nothing. What am I supposed to do? Like, she resisted at first. And then she said, oh, did Allah tell you to do this? And when he says yes, she's like, okay. That's when she sort of was like, okay, this is a test for me. Because she had taqwa, because she had tawakkul, she wasn't relying on her husband, because at that point her husband was leaving her. He was leaving her in the desert. But because she had Allah and because she had that spiritual intimacy, she was able to say, okay, I don't like this situation, I don't know where this is going, but I have faith and I will trust. That's what Pilgrimage of the Soul is meant to remind women of, that your focus does not have to be your husband and your children. Your focus can be Allah. And when your focus is Allah, it naturally flows down to everyone else in your life.
Oh, that's brilliantly well said. I think, well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, do you think that, like, the idea of the husband being, in some cases, unfortunately, being like, people view the husband as like you said, like maybe like in the place of Allah. That's why when sometimes marriages do not work or people go their separate ways, because I see it a lot. I get messages from women who are maybe going through divorce or they're divorced, feeling that they've failed or they're a failure or they haven't got a man or Allah displeased with them, as if the husband is like earning his pleasure is the most important thing. And I just think, you know, like what you said about, I think just, yeah, I mean, can you touch on that? Because like the divorce issue and why divorce is not a failure. I mean, I don't think it is a failure, but like how we can maybe like teach or realign the mindset of some women, whether they're married, not married, or going into marriage or think about marriage, about the perspective of, yes, marriage is a blessing, but it doesn't define you as a woman, and even divorce doesn't make you less of a woman or like a failure. I just think that needs to be kind of like maybe reminded to women. Or what are your thoughts on that? Maybe I've misunderstood. Or what are your thoughts about the divorce?
I think it's 100% true. I think people misuse a hadith and literally tell that, you know, husband had, you know, if you don't have sex with your husband, he'll curse you till morning. You know, the majority of the women in hellfire will be women. You hear this, and there's no context, there's no nothing. Just women are. I heard it even before I became a Muslim. I think divorce. All I will say to women when they or people when they say, "Oh, divorced women are damaged goods." What did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What did he do? Who did he marry? He married women who had been widowed. He married women who had, you know, married before. Divorce is disliked by Allah because Allah wants people to come together and experience harmony. It's disliked partially because divorce it takes care of family. It is painful. Even if it's amicable, it's painful. But divorce is halal. Divorce is an option. It does not mean that you're damaged goods. It does not mean that there's something wrong. And when I see women who are going through divorce, almost 100% of the time, the women bear the brunt of the responsibility for the relationship failing. The relationship failed because I'm not pretty enough, because I gained weight, because I don't cook well enough, because. We never look at divorce as being something that both people enter into. Marriage is a choice of a woman. Divorce, for the most part, is the choice of the man, because the man, sometimes has to sign off on a woman being able to be divorced. And I think people take that balance that is Sharia and they misuse it, and they use it as a way to spiritually abuse women. So you have women who get divorced and they have put their husband on such a pedestal because from a very young age they've been taught that your husband is like, if you were to bow to anyone in the dunya, it would be your husband. So when that is taken away, of course you're going to feel like a failure. Of course you're going to feel like something is wrong with you. Of course you're going to feel as if Allah hates you, rather than looking at divorce as possibly being a blessing, looking at divorce as being Allah's mercy. We look at divorce as being Allah's wrath. I heard a tell me the imam told her that her divorce was a sign of Allah being displeased with her. Allah tests those who, if divorce is, Allah loves you, and divorce can be a sign of Allah's mercy. You know how many people get divorced and then their lives change for the better because of it? Sometimes those people might find each other again. Sometimes those people might find an even better partner. Divorce is not, it's not a stamp, right, that should be placed on women. But in our communities, in the Muslim community especially, when you're a divorced woman, it's like you're a pariah, like something is totally wrong, when divorce is actually something that is very common, it is very natural, and sometimes is very necessary.
I'm not surprised. I've heard similar things like when you said that the Imam said that divorce is a sign of Allah's wrath. And I'm just thinking, like in your experience, when some of these Imams or religious figures are challenged with saying such incorrect things, what has been the reaction? Or have you experienced any of them being challenged, like when they're saying some of these like damaging things? Because it's like you said, it's not from our teachings, but I'm just wondering, what is the response in your experience when some of these figures have been confronted when they're saying such damaging things about? I don't know.
So I think the problem is that they're not challenged.
They're not challenged.
They're not challenged because when you're a woman, so I'll use myself as an example, right? This is a rare, very private moment that I will share. My husband and I were going through a very tumultuous time in our marriage, and we were considering divorce. So we went to an imam, and the first thing the imam tells me is, you need to have more sex with your husband. He didn't hear the problem. He just heard that you were having issues. You need to have more sex with your husband. My first thing was like, bro, do you know me? Like, do you know what I do? Like, that's not the problem. Like, that was the problem. The problem, I'll be able to tell you. And I challenged him. And when I challenged him, he did not really have anything to say except for, because he asked my husband to leave the room, and then he told me, this is what you need to do. You need to have sex with your husband so that he feels very loved, so that he feels very cared for, and then just be patient. And I said, that's not going to fly, Imam. That's not going to work. And I really challenged him big time. When my husband comes back into the room, the imam tells my husband, your wife talks too much. She's too loud. You need to get her to work on being more modest. And my husband, even though we were in the midst of this very, difficult time, he was just like, okay, like there's a script. It's almost like there's a script. You have to remember what's wrong with the woman. And then, you just focus on that. Not all of the women I know are as strong as me. I have no problem telling somebody, you're wrong. That's incorrect. I will sit in the masjid during Jummah And if I hear something wrong in the khutbah, I'll be like, that ain't what it say. And I'll say it out loud because somebody else is thinking it and I'm going to voice it. So imagine if I'm a woman I'm an intimacy expert. Like couples come to me to help them through their marital issues. I'm well versed in my deen. I know the ahadith. I know the fiqh. I know all of this. Imagine if I am getting this. What is happening to this sister who doesn't have any of that? Right? What is happening to these women? So it happens a lot. They're not challenged. And I think when people speak Arabic and they come with, they start reciting what Allah says in the Quran, and they start reciting these verses, you can feel like trapped and intimidated, especially if you're not an Arabic speaker, you're not Hafiz Quran, you don't know, you're like, oh, well, maybe what he is saying is true. And everything in society like tells you the woman is wrong, the woman is wrong. My mother even told me, she told my husband, when my husband went to ask for my hand in marriage, he went with his father and his cousin. My mother told him, I know that if you and Angelica ever get divorced, it will be her fault, not yours, because you're a good man. My mama ain't never met this man before. This is the first time she had ever met this man. And she said that to him. And my husband came back and he was like, your mom said this, and I don't know like where that's coming from. My mother's a Christian. So it's not just a Muslim thing. It's a woman thing where women are so powerful. We have to figure out a way to make sure you know your place. Because if you don't know your place, you're going to take up all the space in the room. And I think that's what the imams and the ministers are afraid of, is they're afraid of a woman who knows her power and who also knows Allah. Because if you're a woman who has tawakkul, if you rely on Allah, you good. That's why I can sit and have these imams say crazy stuff to me, and I'm like, okay, bro, you on one. Because I know what Allah really said, and I have Allah. Sometimes we have our tawakkul is misplaced. It's placed in human beings, and it's not placed in Allah. And that's why so many women are made to suffer, because we're not taught the proper way.
Yeah, there's a lot that you said that the whole idea, and that's, with all due respect to your mum, but like this whole idea that a good man, and you hear it a lot in different communities, like if someone's a good man, then it's naturally the woman's fault. You can have two good people that are just not compatible. They could be, and that's something that you don't really hear much of. It's like, okay, there's a good and there's a bad. So the bad person, of course, if the man was good, then obviously the other person has to be bad, which is the woman. And it's just, there's a lot that can be said about it. I think there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done, and even with men, we need to be challenged. We're human beings at the end of the day, and even if you're in a position of authority, and I don't know, maybe it's different in male circles, but actually tell a lie. When I first started learning a little bit about the deen, I did notice that people who had a certain level of knowledge of Arabic or could recite the Quran in a certain way, or their beard was down to their belly button, they would say some nonsense, and then when people were to challenge them, if they knew that the person knew what they were talking about, then they would kind of like humble themselves, or they will correct themselves, or they will but they have to acknowledge or recognize that this person knows what I'm talking about. Like I've been in situations where someone is just lying, and then when you correct them, like I remember when I was in Egypt, when I was studying in the high school in Azhar, and what was crazy, he was talking about male and female interactions in the West, and he's never been to the West, and he was saying that, in the West, all they do is have sex with each other all the time, and like you can just walk into a room, and you just have to go blow, and she'll take all her clothes off you. And I was like, what is he talking about? And he was saying all of these things to talk about how the West is just, the place of fitna, and the women are loose and this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, you do recognize you've got people from the UK and even from the States in your class. And when I spoke to him after, then he just, he would then just say, no, it's just something to try and encourage people for them to guard their modesty and not to go to the West, because he was saying in Egypt, a lot of people are fascinated and they just love the West. I said, okay, fair enough, but that's not it doesn't mean you start telling lies. Did you understand? I'm getting that, to try and get your point across. But just coming to the point about like challenging men or people in religious authorities, if it's obviously a religious figure, when we have examples of Umar ibn al-Khattab being challenged by a woman, and we know we know how firm and strong he was, and he was obviously very pious, but he still was challenged by a woman, and he accepted it, and he said the woman was right, woman is wrong. When you've got these examples, and that's why I think it's important that women empower themselves, because there's a lot of things that, even if they, like, sometimes things doesn't sound right. You know, you don't necessarily need to memorize the Quran. You don't necessarily need to know Arabic. There's certain things you can even ask questions that you can challenge. But people don't know there are examples of people that are better and greater and more pious than some of these religious figures. And they were challenged by women, and they didn't feel any type of way or try to chastise these women. Then I think women will be more, there'll be more people that will be empowered to be able to challenge these other figures. The same way as a man, there's no other human being, male or female, I don't feel that I cannot challenge, because they're a human being at the end of the day. Like, I'm a human being and I can be checked. So this idea that as a woman, it's not part of modesty to challenge a man, it's like, I don't know where you're getting that from, because that's not from the religion. I understand social conditioning and culture and stuff like that, but if you're empowering yourself with what religion teaches, there are examples of empowered women who challenged men, or even challenged men who asked questions or wanted to know, is that actually right? But this idea that, you know, and again, they'll use the word modesty as if modesty means to be disempowered, to be meek, to be something that you can't. That's, again, just it's just something that, because again, don't get me wrong, I do think obviously there's a lot of things that of unlearning that we as men need to do, but at the same time, I think it's important that women empower themselves. The same way as a black person, I'm not going to wait for white people to empower me. I want to try and empower myself, so to speak. So I definitely think there's a lot. That's why, coming back to the topic of today, why it's important to, like, the work that you're doing, creating sacred spaces for women, so women are empowered, because rather than waiting for men to kind of give you the power, you can empower yourself, obviously by the will of Allah. So I just think that, just wanted to reiterate that point, and what you said earlier, which I want just to say again for the benefit of the people listening, about, I like telling women that what you can do to please, it's not about what you can do to please your husband, it's about what you can do to please Allah, and making Allah the focus. That's something that I think is essential, that even we as Muslims, we kind of forget about. You know, that especially for women, if you're taught that it's all about obeying and pleasing your husband, no, your goal, you should be theocentric. It's about pleasing Allah, not about pleasing this man. And that's something, again, we don't really, even with, or I see it with children from certain cultures, and some parents abuse that you have to obey your parents at all costs, even if it's to your own detriment. So it's like your parents now become God. Do you understand what I'm getting at? And you see it with parents, and likewise I see it with, I'm thinking, where do I see it with men, that men are in that? Okay, I see it with some, sorry, Ron.
Men with their mothers are like that.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Because men sometimes put their mothers on this pedestal, and they will oppress and abuse their wives so that they can satisfy their mothers. That is the form of, that's the same as women doing it with their husbands. A lot of men do it with their mothers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. You can't say anything bad about my mom's never wrong. The mom is never wrong. It's true.
Mom is never
That's
wrong.
True.
You know,
that's true.
Because my mother said, you know, and I've seen it happen, like, in real time, and I'm like, bruh, like, the problems in your relationship, it's your mama, like, you know, because just like children are a trust for us, when you are taking a woman from her family and you are becoming her protector, you have to protect her. You know, it's not about your sometimes that means you have to protect her from your mother. That's a mind. So there are horizontal and vertical relationships that we have, right? There's a vertical relationship from mother to son. So it's like, my mother is here, I'm her child. But you also have this horizontal relationship with your wife, and you also have a vertical relationship with her too, because you're her protector. Sometimes you have to protect your wife from the person who protected you growing up. That's a mind screw that a lot of Muslim brothers, I won't say Muslim, but a lot of men from certain cultures cannot understand it. That's where it comes. Because if your mother is oppressing your wife, right? If your mother is saying rude things to your wife, if your mother is leading you and pulling you away from your family, then your mother is pulling you away from something that, you know, Allah has placed mercy and barakah in for you, what does that mean? And, people say, well, paradise lies at the feet of our mother. We shouldn't say, oof, to our parents. We have to be obedient to your parents. Being obedient is not being in complete subservience and control of. That's not what it means. If I'm obedient to my husband, that doesn't mean that he's going to tell me what to do and I'm going to be like, yes, sire, I'm not doing that. It's the same thing with your mother. Like, you can be obedient to your parents, but if your mother has overstepped a boundary at some point, you have to come up as the Khalifa of your home, as the imam of your family. And you have to say, no, mom, this is not correct. You can do it with love and with respect, but that's where it manifests for men. And and the funny, when you even say that to men don't talk about mom. Like, men won't even have the conversation.
I'm not gonna lie, there's an the internal of my heart, you'd be like, what's she saying? What are you talking about my mom?
You paused a bit like, wait a minute, can I say that? You see?
Nice. Oh wow. That's true.
So with my son, because my husband is from Ghana. I have a West African mother-in-law. Our relationship was tense at first for a variety of reasons. I didn't get a chance to meet her in person. We talked on the phone, but I didn't meet her in person until I was married for 10 years, and I show up with 2 children and her son, who's my husband. I'm the first, foreigner who married into the family. At that time, I was the only daughter-in-law. And so she's very close to my husband. I had to learn how to navigate that relationship just like she had to learn. But the thing that made it easier is my husband. He knew when to step up and when to step back. He knew when to step up as my husband. He knew when to step back as her son. That's that balance that you really have to have. But with some men, you can't even say your mother. Even if you want to say your mother's cooking is good, don't talk about my mama. You just
Oh, that's so true.
That's
so true.
And women don't, but see, it's interesting that women, we don't have that relationship with our mothers. It's different, especially for a lot of Black women. Our relationship with our mothers is a lot more tense at times, because at a certain point and at a certain age, you are no longer your mother's child. You become your mother's competition. You become your mother's competition. You become a competition for your father's love. You become a competition because maybe you cook better than your mother. Maybe when your mother looks at you, she sees remnants of the person that she used to be. Maybe you're able to make different choices in your life because of the sacrifices of your mother. So your mother couldn't go to grad school, but here you are graduating with a PhD. Then it's like, wait, hold on. Pause. It's a different kind of relationship. It doesn't happen all the time. No, but in some instances, yes, it does happen. Sometimes your mother doesn't like you because you're too much like her. So women don't have that same relationship with their mothers that men do. There's a African-American proverb, mothers, they love their sons and raise their daughters. So I'm going to raise you to be a good woman and to be a good wife, but I'm going to love my son. You see?
Yeah, that's what you said about daughters becoming their mother's competition. Do you think, can a mother be jealous of her daughter? Is that possible?
Yes! Listen, Habib, it's so bad. I know women who are jealous of their daughters. I know women. When I say I know women, I mean I know women my age who are jealous of their daughters. It happens. And the thing about jealousy is so nefarious because it does not manifest as jealousy in your mind sometimes. Sometimes it manifests as, my child is so disrespectful. You see this girl, she don't listen to nothing I tell her to do. Look at her walking around with an attitude. She thinks she all that. That's jealousy. When you hear those kinds of things come out of your mother's mouth, that's jealousy. Ain't nobody gonna marry you. See how you can't even cook. You can't even make proper rice. Look at this. Who's gonna marry somebody like that? That's jealousy. That's jealousy. You tell your mom, I got a Fulbright scholarship. Oh, you're gonna go waste your life traveling. You should be looking for a husband. You shouldn't be looking for more academic opportunities. That's jealousy. That's jealousy.
And I know it's probably a very difficult question, but what advice would you give to a daughter who is in that situation where her mom, because so she's thinking, I need to obey my mom and things like that, but at the same time, she feels like she's in this situation that you kind of described where maybe her mum is jealous of her. What advice, if any, could you? I'm just, it just boggles my mind to kind of be in that kind of predicament, to be honest with you.
I'm in that predicament. I feel that with my mother. I feel that with my mother sometimes. And we had to have a conversation. And what I had to realize is what led my mother to this space of trauma that she would feel the need to lash out at her child. I had to remember my mother at 25, my mother at 15. I'm 45. I'm the same age my mother was when I started to feel as if my mother was treating me differently. And because I'm at the age now, I think, oh, this is what she was experiencing. This is what she was going through. I think humanizing our mothers is Mariam and I, not thinking a woman is good because she's a wife. Also looking at your mother not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman, thinking the same, Western male dominant views that are oppressing us, they oppressed your mother. What was your mother's relationship like with her mother? I think humanizing our mothers is a way of, you take yourself out of the middle. This is why I teach on Allah-centered self-love, which is something that it permeates all of my courses. We talk about it in Pilgrimage of the Soul as well. Allah-centered self-love says, I put Allah at the center. My most important relationship is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every other relationship is a reflection of that. So my relationship with Allah should reflect in my relationship with my mother. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to look at my mother as a facet of Allah's creation. Allah created her. Allah created her a certain way. What are the lessons that I can glean from her life? And instead of taking it personally, I'm going to look at my mother and I'm going to have a sense of humanity, not pity, right? But I'm going to look reflectively on what would make my mother behave in this way. And wallahi, it changes everything. It changes everything. Kindness changes everything. Obedience and kindness are not two different things. So case in point, my mother's husband passed away 3 weeks ago, right after I got back from Senegal. He and I had a very complicated relationship, very much so. But for right now, what my mother needs most is help. So I, her only child, am organizing a Christian-based memorial service for her husband. Not because I feel like I have to, not because she asked me to, but because I want to be an obedient daughter. I want to show my mother that I love her through doing this thing. Do I still have complicated feelings around my relationship with him? Yes. At times, do my mother and I still butt heads? Yes. But that's my mother. And the bitterness and the anger that I internalized, it didn't do nothing to my mama. It just did something to me. So then if my mother has these emotions that she may even be unconsciously displaying towards me, I become bitter, I become angry. What happens to my two daughters? I repeat the cycle. Somebody has to, you know how when, something is spinning, you got to put your hand in it to stop it. Somebody has to put their hand and stop the wheel. That's how you stop it. You humanize your mother, you practice kindness, and you put Allah in the center. Is it easy? No. It's not easy. It's very hard. Yes, you can have it. It's very hard, but it's a constant. We talk about this in my Rites of Passage program with women. It's a constant process where you have to constantly, and sometimes you have to come to a point of realization that mother will never change. You also have to accept that mother will never change. My mother still, my brothers can do no wrong. Still. That's not going to change. My mom is 75. It's not going to change. We all love our mother. We all respect her dearly. We all would, give the world for her. That's just something that I have to understand. And then you just move accordingly. You just move accordingly. Nobody's gonna have a lifetime channel worthy, you know, life at all times. There are going to be difficult relationships, but again, this is a sign of Allah's mercy for me, because difficult and complicated relationships with my mother make me remember Allah. Because sometimes I have to sit there, and I work in the same organization, we see each other all the time. You know, sometimes there's stuff that comes up at work that I have to deal with, and I have to just start doing some dhikr. Stuck for the law, stuck for the law, stuck for the law, stuck for the law. So this complicated relationship with my mother is making me do what? Turn towards Allah. That's a mercy. See, it's all in how it's just all about your intention and how you look at things. And that's why in Pilgrimage of the Soul, we talk about just sometimes it's just a matter of reframing. Sometimes it's just a matter of reframing. So that was long, but
yeah, just for the, no, again, just for the benefit of anyone that's joining halfway through, I'm speaking to the phenom, Angelica Lindsay Ali, the Village Auntie, who is, yeah, who's blowing me away again. She's got an upcoming course, a 3-week course starting next week, called the Pilgrimage of the Soul, which is a 3-week course starting next week, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. GMT UK time. Tickets are available. Please go to the Village Auntie's Instagram page to buy a ticket, rather than just getting all of this free wisdom and knowledge and jewels that she's dropping. Make sure, and I don't use the word support, because she is not a charity. She's giving valuable advice. She's sharing her knowledge and expertise. And if you want to continue benefiting from her, and again, I'm not using the word support, you need to show your appreciation by buying a ticket. Even if you've attended, or if you bought one ticket, then I'll say buy another one and then gift it to someone. But yeah, what you said was, I think maybe if you haven't already, dehumanizing your parents, I definitely think you need to do that as another course, because with men, I think with our fathers, definitely the mother side, I agree, because like your mum is just like an angel, she can do no wrong. But I think, yes, and as men, we do have the number, well, some of us maybe have complicated relationship with our mothers, but definitely, I know even with our fathers, and when you mentioned about humanizing our parents, and I was thinking about, yeah, even like with my dad, yeah, it's a different, that's true.
You see?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true.
Even with my father-in-law. So my father died when I was 16. Even with my father-in-law, I got a speeding ticket, my only speeding ticket I ever got, and I was about having to go to traffic school. My husband went to his house the next day. He came back with a check. My father paid for driving me. He literally spoils me. He's driven me to prenatal appointments. Like if my husband and I having just like a minor disagreement at the house or something, he'll just be like, young kudi, like this, he always will take, like, he spoils me. So it's the same. I see my husband sometimes, he'll be like, well, why are you taking Angelica's side? So it's the same. And in their mothers, it's the same.
And you mentioned the rites of passage course. Is that still available for anyone?
Yes. So this will be the last Pilgrimage Soul is offered in this format. It is an online class. All of the sessions are recorded. There are 3 sessions. There's live interaction during the session, private WhatsApp group that you are able to be a part of. With Foundational Womanhood will remain, it will be a standard offering. It is a rites of passage program for women, who never got a chance to go through a formal rites of passage process. There's an application. The application is not for admission. The application is for us to know about men who want this program. We will be issuing the applications in July. They will be due in September, and start classes at the end of September, October. Last year we did the program, we had 95 women graduate. Shout out to Divine 5. It was just a transformative program. We talked about epigenetic trauma. We did sacred body care. We talked about, connection to the self. We talked about feminine rights, identify the faith of life. It's really, so if Pilgrimage of the Soul is my favorite course, then Foundational Womanhood is my favorite program. And it is meant to be a program where women become divine, really for. And I've seen friendships, you know, develop as a part of this. So that will be the application for that will be going out in July. Pilgrimage of the Soul is June 26th, July 3rd, and July 10th. So that last week in July is when applications, so no money is due, but when applications for Foundational Womanhood will go out at the end of July, inshallah.
And is there any like pre-course reading, or do they need to do any reading beforehand or watch anything beforehand, or they can just literally?
They don't need to do anything. They just have to come empty. They have to come as an empty vessel. Everything you need now foundation is heavy. It's heavy. Homework. You have to write a paper. There is a graduation. There are readings. There are videos that are part of it, and then they also, so because my classes tend to be very large, the women are broken up into pods. So they are smaller groups that meet during the week. They have a pod leader. And so they form. So if you imagine the village, I designed it in my mind like a village, right? So if you imagine the village, then there are these little huts, right, that are a part of the village. And each pod is named after a woman in my life who has had an impact. So there's Dora, the Dora pod, which is named after my mother, also my great-great-grandmother, Dora Lofton. There's Bessie Pod, my grandmother, Juanita, my grandmother, Mabiba, who's one of my village aunties. There's Fabayo, one of my village aunties. So it's a modern interpretation of a West African rites of passage program. You do not have to be Black to participate. There are women of all backgrounds to participate. It's my favorite program. And there are a lot of sisters who are Divine 95. You see them throwing up their ferns.
Yeah, sorry, I saw the comments and I was like, I actually should be actually reading them because there's quite a few. You've got a lot of rhymes. So I do apologize if anyone's asking questions. I'm just being absorbed by what you're saying. And again, I don't know if I've asked this already, but if, for example, anyone is not able to attend the live course, but obviously they said purchase a ticket, is it possible for them to watch it later on, for example, during the day or between?
Yes. So with Pilgrimage Soul, we upload all of the audio to a private playlist. And if the class goes for 3 weeks, then you have 4 weeks after the class ends to be able to access the recording. So if you can't make Saturday morning, that's too early, or you have a day party or a barbecue you want to go to, you can always just go to the playlist and listen to it at any time. Some people like to attend the class live and then go back and listen later to take notes. It's available for you for people who pay for the registration.
Oh, so people will have access to the recording. So even if you attend it live, okay,
yeah,
I maybe need to do that because with my one, I did the live. I said anyone who's live, you can listen to it. If you're not live, I'll send you a recording. Anyone else, you've got a week, and then after you can't listen to it again. So maybe I need to do that. Because you're right. I think the way people listen is different, and obviously sometimes people need to digest some information. Maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes at a time, and then kind of go back to it because there's other stuff to do. So, yeah. So again, just for the benefit of anyone who's just joined, I'm speaking to the Village Auntie, who is a phenomenal intimacy coach, relationship expert, and the founder of the Village Auntie Institute. She has a 3-week course starting on Saturday, which is a course on spiritual intimacy, which is created by women and specifically for women. Yeah, just anyone who likes my work, I would definitely recommend those purchase my book to definitely buy her book, Passage. I still read it to this day, and to attend her courses because one of my fears, and I'll say this, I've kind of said this privately to the Village Auntie, but one of my fears is that she's going to stop doing what she's doing soon. So that's why I'm encouraging people as much as you can. If you want to continue benefit from her work, 'cause I don't think people realize a lot of the work that she's doing behind the scenes. If you want to continue benefit from her, you need to obviously, and again, I don't want to use the word support, but show your appreciation by buying a ticket. If you can afford 2 tickets, buy 2 tickets. You can afford 3 tickets, buy 3 tickets, and you can maybe give them to someone who maybe can't afford it. But I wouldn't encourage promoting anyone to kind of or to ask the Village Auntie to give any discounts because this work is beneficial. It's something that again
we did discount.
sorry.
We did lowered the.
Not on my platform. Sorry, I'm not speaking about discounts. Sorry, because I think you deserve every penny,
No,
and I
but we
think even go on.
already did.
I'll be honest, because if it was up to me, even that 145 that you're charging, I think for 7.5 hours of content over 3 weeks, and what you're providing, your intellectual property, you should be charging triple that. But you're very, mashallah, you're thinking about this is heart of gold, and you want it to be accessible to as many people as possible, which I commend you for that. But at the same time, I just think it's important that your courses and work you're doing is sustainable for you and your family. That's why. Do you understand? That's my only. But it's the balance. Don't get me wrong, because like you said, you want to make it accessible to as many people as possible. But I think people also need to recognize the same way a lot of people will spend hundreds of pounds for the latest iPhone or Samsung phone, or to watch, all of these things on Netflix or whatever. When we want to find the money, we can find the money. And again, when you look at 7.5 hours over 3 weeks, and again, what you're getting from that, something that hopefully is not only going to be not informative, but nourishing for both the mind and the soul, and it can be beneficial in terms of how you look at the world, that is priceless as far as I'm concerned. So if that knowledge that's what you're imparting, which you are, and people are benefiting from that, and you've got testimonies, it's not about support, because again, you're not a charity. It's about showing appreciation. And I understand it's very difficult to say, because the value that you're bringing, because obviously you're humble and everything. But I think it's important that others who recognize that work, and that's why I try and show my appreciation by kind of, it gets to the point where people asking, why are you always posting the Village Auntie when you're, I'm like, because I appreciate your work. Seriously. It's not, of course, there's no like brown paper bag that you're paying me or whatever. It's just, I actually appreciate your work. And I know that it's very difficult, especially as a woman and a visibly Muslim woman, to be doing the work that you're doing, not only about intimacy, but also about spirituality and things like that. And I just hope and pray that Allah continues to preserve you and make you steadfast, so you can continue doing what you're doing for as long as you can, because I don't want you to burn out, and I don't want you to stop doing it in a year or 2 years. I want you to be doing it, inshallah, for many, many more years to come, and obviously to empower other women to take on your mantle, continue. Because we speak a lot about the lack of Muslim scholars, the lack of Muslim women scholars, Muslim women intellectuals, and this and the other. We've got someone in our presence who's doing the work. And again, like I said, it's not about showing the support because she's not a charity. It's about showing our appreciation by, again, purchasing a ticket, and then purchasing a ticket for others who we think will be. Because again, what a beautiful gift to give to someone. If you think this is beneficial, they can learn it. If not, they can't attend on Saturday. They can attend, obviously, watch it during the week. So that's just my kind of 2 pence on this. Because again, I want you to continue doing what you're doing, but at the same time, you need to be compensated. So that's all I wanted to say. That I don't want to take too much of your time, because I know that you've got a lot of stuff that you're going to be dropping on the course, and I don't want you to share. Even I think people have had more than enough. Yes. So I'll kind of like end here. If anyone's got any questions, I'm not going to take any. I'll say purchase the ticket, and then you can ask the Village Auntie on Saturday. Because I did receive quite a few questions. I was like, yeah, just watch the live. So now hopefully they're watching it, and then my reply is, go and purchase the ticket, and then you can ask any questions on Saturday or the week after. So I'll just end it there. But thank you again, the Village Auntie, for gracing us with your presence. And again, we will talk soon. But yeah, I just wanted to have a short, I don't know how long it's been, but I didn't want to take too much of your time. But we definitely will reconvene, inshallah, sometime shortly.
Inshallah. Thank you, Habib. I appreciate you. Always supportive. And
no worries.
I appreciate it. And encourage you to channel my Nigeria. So
yes. I remember you said even was it 2019 that passage came out? Was it? It was 2020, the year of no.
Yes.
No freebies. It's the year of no. No freebies. No emotional blackmail. No spiritual manipulation. If someone's not giving you what you're worth, the answer is no. Let's continue that message, inshallah. But I want to try and say this again. So, Jazakallah khairan, and yeah, assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for everyone listening. And yeah, again, like I said, purchase a ticket. It's available from the Village Auntie's website. Go to her page and you see the link in her bio. Pilgrimage of the Soul. It's a 3-week course specifically for women. So men, you can buy a ticket as well for your wives or your significant others or your mothers or even your daughters or your sisters or your friends or your just buy a ticket. Just buy a ticket. And I'll just end it on that. But yeah, Jazakallah khairan again.
Thank you.
The Village Auntie again. We'll be talking soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Alaikum salam.